So, hallo Nerdingers, heute mit einer Ikone des Superheldentums. I'm here with an icon of the superhero scene. An icon because he killed an icon and he brought him back to Dan Jurgens. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's all the time when you have done so many stuff, but the first thing people talking to you is about how you killed Superman.
Mm-hmm. Yes, everyone always wants to know about that. And it was a very exciting time all the way back in 1992. And it was a lot of fun. And really what we wanted to do was make a statement about how important Superman was through his death. And it's just like whenever we experience death around us in our own lives, we come to remember and be aware of just how important people were to us. And that's what we were doing at that time.
I remember that really the press, the media, everybody talked about when they announced they will kill Superman. And also with this iconic cover or a lot of iconic covers. Mm-hmm. You had this time, the one with his cape as a flag, and then the other was, I think Lois Lane had Superman in front bleeding, and a lot of really great covers. So it was a big thing then. How did you get approached? Did they just, do you want to kill Superman, or?
No, we were the creative teams, which were the writers and the artists and the editorial staff. We would get together once or twice a year to plan out stories for Superman, and we had lightly approached the idea of doing that a year or two before, but we had no story to go along with it. Even this time around, the idea was finding the story. What is the essence of the story? You can't just have Superman die. There has to be a point to it all. And the point really was going to be in the stories that came out right after his death, where the world does not have a Superman. So what does he mean at that point? Not just to all the characters in the universe of DC Comics, but also the people in the real world. Because as the media picked up on the story, they were having the same discussions in reality that our characters were having inside the books. And that's one of the reasons everything worked as well as it did.
So, but when you needed a villain to kill Superman. He's the guy. I think one problem with Superman is if you have a character that's so strong like Superman, you always have to think about things that could endanger him. So it's not easy to find something. You have to make him weak with kryptonite or a little bit to magic or whatever. But to make this story that big, you needed something that's stronger than Superman. So Doomsday was created.
And when I walked into the meeting that first day, I had two ideas written on a tablet. One was Monster Crashes Metropolis, and the other one was Death of Superman. And for the Monster Crashing Metropolis, I had no idea those two ideas would become associated, that they would connect. But I wanted to do something like that because at that time, so many of Superman's villains were guys in business suits. Luthor wore a business suit. You had Toyman and so many others that Superman couldn't fight. And really, a part of superhero comics is a good, strong fight. So we started talking about this idea of Death of Superman, and gee, what if instead of Luthor, instead of Brainiac, the standard villains, it was a new character? And we went back to this idea of the monster, and all of the artists in the room, it was myself, Tom Gorman, John Bogdanoff, and Jackson Geist, we all drew up our version of what that monster would be, and we ended up picking mine, and that's where Doomsday was born. And even at that time, we still didn't have the name. That came a little bit later when the editor just wrote, instead of Death of Superman, he wrote Doomsday for Superman on the board. And I remember saying, is there a character out there called Doomsday anywhere? And boom, that's where the name came from.
And in the follow-up of Superman's death, we had a lot of new characters showing up. It was the reign of the Superman, and I thought this all was brilliant. But then there came the next milestone, and it was Superman coming back. I guess it was. I think at the beginning you all agreed that he couldn't stay dead, or was this an option?
No, we all realized, even if it wasn't us, that eventually Superman would be back. We did not know how it would happen. We did not know exactly when it would happen in terms of timing. When we planned the death, we did not have the story at all for how he might come back. And what happened is, sales were great. Everybody in the company, meaning higher-ups and everybody, said, okay, it's time to bring Superman back. And so, again, the creative teams got together, and we all had different ideas that time about how Superman might come back. And it was Lee Simonson who said, gee, it's too bad we all just can't do our own ideas. And out of that, we said, well, what if we did? And then the idea of the 4 Supermen came out of that. And that way everybody got to explore different themes on their own and introduce new characters at the same time, which just sort of continued to build the momentum.
Still brilliant today. So the other question is, I think it was a great time for you, and I'm pretty sure you're still proud of what you have done at this time. But is it sometimes a little bit nervy if you get always asked back to this time?
No, it really isn't, and a lot of it is because it was so long ago. I appreciate the fact that people still talk about it, they still remember it, they still buy the albums and collected editions. So it's nice to have that to refer to, and plus at the same time, I have continued to work on the character and do other stories with Superman and continue to add to the character's history and tapestry, which is how I think of characters. So I've done a lot since then as well. So yes, but it's actually kind of a nice tribute that people go back and still ask about it, and that I don't think they still would unless there was some quality there. So I like to think, okay, it worked.
So let's stop this theme from the history now, this big theme from the superheroes history, and go to the now time. So what's a recent thing you work on?
There have been several things, and one of the most notable ones is a Batman project with Mike Perkins as artist. I wrote it, and it was called The Batman First Night, which very much goes back to the days in which that character was created. He first showed up in 1939, and we pick up as though he was brand new in Gotham City and had only been around, say, at that time, maybe a month to 6 weeks, and still more of a rumor than anything that people had actually seen. And I wanted to explore that because it was such an interesting time in history. The entire world was on the verge of war. The entire world was mired in the Great Depression. And because of that, so many things were happening. And yet that character, if you read his earliest adventures from, say, Detective Comics number 27, where he first showed up, on through even Detective Comics, say, 35, you can tell it's a character that is very much a part of those times. They don't get into those themes necessarily, but certainly you feel the late 30s all around it in the way the characters exist and interact and all of that. So I just said, this is a tremendously interesting time in which to set that character, because so many characters do fit best in their own times that way, in their original times.
I think that's very interesting. I like this story very much, and I think it's very interesting because to put a character in 2025 back to where it came into existence, but with the storytelling from today, I think this is very remarkable. I like that idea because it's got a double meaning then.
Yes, and it does, and it also allows us to add attributes to the characters around them that we might otherwise not do now. So, for example, we make it clear that Commissioner Gordon had fought in World War I. And so he has that as a backstory, which I think is very interesting. We have Bruce Wayne living all alone with no Alfred the butler, with no Batcave or anything else, because as I told DC and always communicated to Mike Perkins, the idea is Batman is totally alone here, and he's figuring it out as he goes along, and he gets by on wits and guile and brains as much as anything else. And, you know, he takes quite a beating throughout the story, but I really wanted to make him very, very human, because in the comics of today, he is almost superhuman. There's nothing he can't do. You know, he was off in space, rambling from planet to planet in a different series and things like that. And I said, let's just take it right down to the creative essence of who this character is.
We talked about Superman, we talked about Batman, and I talked, I know you have done a lot more stuff for the big ones. So let's take those very iconic characters and ask the master, what is more interesting working with, Superman or Batman?
Oh, that's really hard. They're incredibly different. So I think we always start with that. And Batman at his core is a very damaged individual. You know, his origin is, as a youngster, he saw his parents gunned down in front of him. He is a damaged human being, and one, I think, that does not relate well with the rest of the world. I do think he's a loner and just trying to find his place, which can be hard for someone as damaged as his. Whereas, you know, Superman, in the way he was raised and everything, rocketed from another world, comes and grows up in the middle of the United States, Kansas, which is like the center of the U.S., and had parents who raised him throughout and did right by him. He is almost a supremely healthy individual, and I mean that mentally, where that's part of what makes them different. And then there's this idea that Superman is of the daylight and the sun. He does not wear a mask. Batman is of the night, and he wears the mask to hide who he is. So what I appreciate is the differences between the two, and I don't know that I find one more or less interesting, but I like doing them both at the same time because I can play with those differences.
So last question. If you talk to nerds, which I do very often, very often is the question, so who is the mightiest of the superheroes? Who would stand at the end of a battle of the superheroes? And some of the creatives also have thought about this, and I think most of them would agree in the end victorious would always be Batman. He's the guy who can take out even the superest of the super. Would you agree to this?
No. Nine. In the way I work, and part of the commentary to me is Batman is incredible because he has no powers and he can do so much. But if we get into that kind of a fight in that kind of a moment, as clever as he is, you know, I still think that can't happen. That we have almost built him to a level that defies reason in that way, and I know why the nerds want to go there, and I know why they love it. But for me, there's more of a practical element to it, where I just say, no, it's not going to be him. It's going to be Superman.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dan Jurgens.
Yes, indeed. My pleasure.
Great. So that's it.
Okay.